So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged, and it was intended that the next video would be sort of a preview little video for the next patch. However, I think Kuro underestimated the amount of work he would have to do to give me the raw materials that I need to do that, so that will probably be the next Reforged video I do after this one. But this is still something which is good and new, because it seems that someone else has now entered the arena of map and scenario making, because this is a scenario made by Goddess Nimhain, or Nimhain, also known as Outfit on the Discord, and in the description below I will be adding in the links to the official Reforged Discord and to Horton's Spawn of Sauron Discord, because I think that Outfit will be making scenarios for that campaign now. Either way, it's probably a good idea that you join both Discords if you're interested in getting involved in Reforged, because of course it's very easy to join up with games, and there will be the links to the Mod of the Year 2017 vote and to the download page on the ModDB, so there's going to be plenty of links in the description below, as well as the timestamp for the battle starting if you're not really into the army compositions and the map itself. So it seems like this is a sort of basin village with several ways in, and then the village itself has got several roads leading into it as well to the town centre here in the middle, and the orcs seem to have captured this village here, and now the free peoples of Middle-earth are trying to retake it. So we'll start with the attacking armies, I believe, and we'll start off with this first army over here. Master Blaster playing as the Kingdom of Arnor, and he has got some Dunedain Wardens. He's got some dismounted Dunedain Knights. Not often you see the I'll just pause this actually. Not often you see the forces for good on the attack, and this does mean that they will have quite a lot of numbers and quite a lot of elite units on their side. So we'll see how this goes. 34k frames is pretty good for a sort of siege battle without any walls. It's really sort of quite wide choke points, so that bodes well. We've also got some Dunedain Bodyguard here, also known as the Steel Bowmen. These guys are of course incredibly powerful, very good at range and in melee as well. We also have a unit, the Arnor Gate Guard, going to be very good to help the Arnorians force their way through the choke point. 2 units of them in fact, and then we've also got some battle ready Dunedain over here. Lighter shock troops, but they do have multiple HP. And we also have some Arthur Day men-at-arms for the sort of bread and butter of the army, which they're going to need because they will take losses on the advance, as all attacking armies will do. They also have a trebuchet, which is going to be a bit of a nightmare for the orcs to try and counter. We'll see if they can sort of counter-charge out here, because Arnor over here does not have any form of cavalry, and indeed nor do their allies. We have the High Elves, played by the scenario creator, Goddess Nimhain himself, or Nimhain. I don't know how to pronounce that. I'm sure I'm pronouncing it wrong, because I'm sure that was mentioned before. But he's got some Sindar Blade Masters, of course, very skillful infantry, going to be difficult for the orcs to deal with in a prolonged fight unless they can shoot them down from a distance. Then of course we have the Eldar Enway Archers, which again, they're going to be a real pain for the high tier orcish units. We also have some Noldor Elder Nobles, which as an archer unit are incredibly powerful indeed. And we also have these Noratirno warriors to add some volume to the Elven Fire, which is going to be raining down. This is a very elite Elven army, because we've got 2 units of the Imladris Guards adding to the 2 units of Gate Guards. So it's going to be a very difficult task for the orcs, I feel, to break these guys down unless they have a lot of ranged firepower. And indeed we also have some Eldar Enway Spearmen back here, a couple of units of Falas Lords and more Mythlod Nobles back here. So really this army that Goddess Nimhain is commanding is incredibly elite. There's also Smiths of Eregion. It's got all of the high elven goodies. So we'll see if the defenders are able to withstand that. The balance of power is even, so I'm sure that they each have some decent troops. We also have the Free Peoples of Eriador being commanded by Baconfish 302. He's got some bandits, which, you know, Eriador in general are not quite as elite focused as the other 2 factions we've already looked at, but they do start some decent units. The Greenway Guards can trade quite efficiently with quite a lot of the lower tier orcish units on account of their AP. We also have some Archer Militia, so this Eriador army is clearly a little bit more fodder focused, but they do have the fearsome Forestshell Gatekeepers, which again the defenders are going to have to be very wary of what they do. I believe over here we've got some more of Baconfish's army. The Cardlan Elders, just get a close-up of these guys, because these guys are pretty cool. They pull out dual daggers in melee. At the moment, in the current patch, they're a little bit underwhelming next to some of the other high-tier archers, at least for their cost, but of course you can see the general there. Of course, you know, in a scenario it doesn't really matter, because you play with the hand you're dealt as opposed to picking your armies. And over here we have the Cardlan Footman, a very cost-effective pike unit. The Lumbermen as well can be cost-effective shock troops. And then back over here we have some of the elites of Eriador. We have the Forestshell Captains, some Bandit Javelins as well, which again, cheap Javelins and cheap skirmishers in general can be used to pretty devastating effect. And over here we have really the very elite core. We've got 3 units of Forestshell Captains for Baconfish, but most of the rest of his army is a little bit less elite in this sort of narrow grassy valley. We also have these bandit javelins, and over here we do have a cavalry force for the good factions, which is the only one that I think they have. They've got some Greenway sentries, 2 units of them. They don't have hit points, so they're going to have to be very much a hit and run style unit, particularly against orcish units. So now we'll have a look at the defending armies, and over here I believe this is going to be, because of their position, more of a reinforcement army. Well, this is Cold Front in fact. So we have, he's playing as the Orcs of the Misty Mountains, and he's got a unit of Bolg's Champions. He's also got some Mountain Trolls over here. So this is sort of the reinforcement column, I imagine. He's also got some Goblin Archers and some Wargs. So he's got some fast moving units and some skirmish units, which he can use to go around the back and try and sort of nullify the threat that Eriador posed with that cavalry. Moving in, the Orcs do have much more in terms of numbers to defend this settlement, and Tundra's Fox is also here with his cave trolls, and he's playing as the Orcs of the Misty Mountains, as he often does. And we also have some Orc bodyguards. These guys are pretty darn good, despite the fact they do look exactly the same as the heavy goblin infantry. Also the heavy goblin crossbows. These guys are going to be a real problem for any of the heavily armoured pikemen on the other front, should they choose to be committed over there. And we also have some heavy goblin infantry as a bit of a tar pit over here, as well as some mountain Uruk archers. And here we have some heavy goblin halberdiers and more heavy goblin infantry. The halberdiers can be used to pretty good effect to cut off any choke points. And if we look over here, this is the rest of Cold Front's army. So this is the Orc bodyguards. We also have some heavy goblin infantry, more heavy goblin infantry, and then if we look over here, he's got a couple of units of mountain Uruk pikes. He's also got some mountain trolls, heavy goblin crossbowmen, and some Blackwatch Legion. The Blackwatch Legion, a very good unit for the Misty Mountains. And then over here we have Age, who I have seen him on the Discord, but I don't think I've ever done a battle with him in it before. He's playing as the Orcs of Gundabad. Of course, some Orc fellas, some mountain trolls, a catapult. This is going to be absolutely key in trying to sort of dissuade the Arnorian advance from just sort of crushing any defence in their way. The Witch Realm Blackguard are also going to be a very deadly unit to use against those heavily armoured troops, provided they're backed up. The Orc fellas, slightly lower tier shock troops. And over here we do have the Witch Realm Hammer Guard, some Guardians of Khan Doom as well. 3 units of the Guardians of Khan Doom. That's going to be difficult to get through. So a real clash of elites here in the mountain village. And we also have some Orc Marauders, some Witch Realm Pikemen as well, forming a nice front line. And then the final army, I believe, is Froggies, and he's playing as the Orcs of Gundabad as well, so he's got some Orc Marauders. Pretty much going to be the same thing, I imagine. He's got some Witch Realm Blackguard. He does have some Scourge Raiders, potentially very good, provided they can dodge the fearsome skirmish line of the High Elves and Arnor. He's also got some Orc fellas and some Pikes, the Trolls of Gundabad with their armour. And then we've got some Orc fellas, and then at the front line over here, they're going to need much more to hold this line because the Orc Marauders. Guardians of Khan Doom are here though, and also you can position archers on either side, so this is a very deadly valley to try and get through, but with the elites of the High Elves and Arnor, they should be able to do it. So, without further ado, I shall make a little cut, and we shall rejoin when the battle is beginning. So, as we can see, the first point of engagement is going to be between Cold Front's Misty Mountains army and Baconfish's Eriador army. Now, this is going to be a rather difficult task for Eriador to withstand, particularly if Cold Front is joined by Tundra's Fox, because the amount of numbers they can bring to bear may well crush through the Eriador defence very easily. The only thing they've got with any sort of rigidity really is the Foreshell Captains. 3 units of them is significant, but they could well be overwhelmed here completely. These Archer Militia are going to be retreating back behind the safety of the Greenway Guards and the Cardolan Footmen just in behind. This is going to be a pretty tough front line to crack, unless the Misty Mountains brings forward some pretty heavy-duty units. The Goblin Infantry won't be able to do so. In terms of sheer numbers, though, they might just be able to force their way through, and the Orc Bodyguards are on the way up, which will be enough to crack this line. As we can see, the Goblins taking their sweet time getting into battle. In fact, they have stopped, so Cold Front is sort of massing his troops, getting ready for a more consistent push. And I don't know, I think the Archer Militia could be very cost-effective here. They could shoot into these Mountain Orc Berserkers, which could be a very worthwhile use of their time. The Mountain Orc Berserkers have got very poor armour values. They don't have armour at all, I think. And the armour-piercing damage they could do could manage to get through these Greenway Guards quite effectively. But the Cardolan Footmen and the Greenway Guards do work in tandem very nicely together. The AP of the Greenway Guards combined with the reach of the Cardolan Footmen makes them a difficult front line to break down, and an impossible front line to break down for Goblin Infantry, although counter-charging with spears is most of the time not really what you want to do. You want to keep them in formation in their shield wall and just allow them to slowly push back against the enemy, because spears don't have the highest shock value anyway, so the counter-charge you're going to get is not really going to affect the enemy lines too badly anyway. Meanwhile, if we look over here in the other canyon, Very much the other way round. Only one unit of Goblin Band is holding this little choke point in Skiltron formation, much more rare formation than it was in standard Third Age. And of course they will be crushed underfoot by Elder Enway Spearmen. The Elder Enway Spears are... they definitely have the style factor going for them, and ever since vanilla they've always been one of the most effective units that you can bring. And of course they are just going to very slowly but surely, not even slowly actually, Spears usually kill slowly, but against a unit as bad as Goblin Band, they're going to get a lot of work done. Although up here you can see that the Snaga Archers are on the hill, and they are firing down, but they are receiving counter-fire, and in a skirmish fight the Snaga Archers are not going to stand a chance. Firing against the Noratirno Warriors, they have done some decent damage to one of the units of Noratirno, but unfortunately, because their fire is directed elsewhere, they've only got one unit of skirmishers firing into this choke point to help out. Interestingly enough though, Cold Front with a very nasty ambush there. The Blackback Berserkers appearing as if from nowhere, and they are able to get into the rear of these Elder Enway Spears, but this is also a bit gung-ho, because the Blackback Berserkers are a unit you really want to use to their fullest effect, and unfortunately here, they've got their backs turned to the skirmishers, and skirmishers are really the kryptonite for these guys. They don't have very high armour, their defence values are not as high as most skirmish troops. The real pull for the Blackback Berserkers is the fact that they have huge attack values. The hit points are the only things that give them survivability, and under skirmish fire they are falling. And, you know, in melee against spears you would expect them to do a lot of heavy lifting, but unfortunately for them here, the skirmishers, the Noratirno Warriors, are going to be sufficient to really pull these guys down and lay them low. So, unfortunately the Elven and Arnorian advance will continue. There is Orc Marauders and more Goblin Band and Skiltron heading up here, and there are also more Snaga Archers taking up position on these ramps. But the amount of damage these guys are going to do to a lot of the heavily armoured Elven and Arnorian units is going to be minimal, especially with Sindar Blade Masters pushing up. So over here the defenders are going to start to struggle unless they have some elites, and the Blackback Berserkers alone are not going to be able to withstand that withering arrow storm. Meanwhile, if we go back over to here, we can see that Cold Front is making a much more dedicated push on this front. He's turned the tables rather, as we see the defenders turning defence into attack, and the Blackwatch Legion, the ideal unit to use against pikemen because they will just force their way through. You can see that they have concentrated into trying to force their way through over here. The lumbermen are going to be pretty good against the heavy goblin infantry, but both the Blackwatch Legion and the Mountain Trolls together will be able to force their way through this line, so Eriador is going to need to get some heavy duty units on hand to deal with this advance, and they do have some Forest Shell captains in the background because Blackwatch Legion are one of the best units in the game for withstanding arrow fire. The frame rate is dropping just a little bit. We can see that there is a time limit for this battle, so time is of the essence for the attackers. But I do like this aggressive play from the defenders. On the other side with the Blackback Berserkers it hasn't really worked, but on this front with the full weight of his army behind him, Cold Front has managed to push through here. And the Trolls, they're trying to get into those Woodland Hunters back there, but the Trolls will also fall pretty quickly to Forest Shell captains, and there's Black Wolds over here as well. The Black Wolds are very attack minded. If they aren't shot down, they are going to be very deadly against a lot of these units, including the heavy goblin infantry. And the Blackwatch Legion, they won't do too well in sustained melee to the Black Wolds either. So the push is continuing though. We shall see how this is going. The Blackwatch Legion should be able to force their way through a little bit further, but as soon as they start hitting the Black Wolds and the Forest Shell captains, they may start to struggle a little bit. The Archers of Eriador and the Archers of the Misty Mountains going toe-to-toe with one another. Eriador should have the advantage there, even with the low-tier archer militia that they have going on. So over here we can see the Thieves of Tharbad springing a little ambush of their own. The Warg Riders being forced in through this narrow corridor, and there are Black Wolds back here as well. The Hidden Murder Squad, the Thieves of Tharbad and the Black Wolds together. It's going to be difficult. As we can see, I don't see the Eriador cavalry anywhere, which means they've probably already been massacred by the Wargs. We can see that there's Snaga Archers and there's underground goblins moving up from Tundra's Fox, so the reinforcements are on the way to try and surround and destroy Eriador, which they do need to do because Eriador's position is the most compromised. The Arnorian and the High Elven advance, as we go back over there, you can see that their army has spread out, the Trebuchet getting into position, and they've got a lot of elite units that they're going to be able to use. If we look up here, the Snaga, you know, they've been cut down by the Noratirno Warriors in the skirmish. Probably a bit of Dunedain fire coming in from there as well, and you can see that the combination of these survivable units like the Dunedain Wardens and the Elder Enway Spearmen being mixed together with the attack-focused Sindar Blade Masters is a synergy which all of these low-tier orcs like Goblin Band and Orc Marauders are not going to be able to withstand. You can see that there is a lot of orcs and goblins for them to force their way through, but they will do so with limited casualties unless they're taking archer fire. And there's a trebuchet shot, not using the the fiery ammunition, which is surprising. Usually the trebuchet gets a lot more splash damage with the fire ammunition. Yeah, with the trebuchet hits, these guys, especially if the fire ammunition is turned on, they will start to rout pretty quickly in the face of this elite force. You can see, however, that the orcs of Gundabad are they're forming up. They've got their is this the Witch-Round Blackguard? No, that's the Numenorean Shadow Guard. So they have got a force ready to sort of try and weather the storm, but I think what they're trying to do is destroy Eriador first, and then focus on Arnor and the High Elves, which is probably the right thing to do, to be honest with you. You can see that the Mountain Orc Berserkers and the Mountain Uruk Pikes moving forward, and in fact, the Blackwatch Legion have managed to force their way through very effectively, and Eriador's front line is crumbling. They didn't reinforce quickly enough with their reserves, and this does mean that the combined forces of the Orcs of the Misty Mountains is going to be able to surround and envelop them. The Blackwatch Legion, they may be dying now, their hit points expended, but they did their job very well. They created the gap, and now, man, all of these arrows flying everywhere does make the frame rate go down a little bit, which is unfortunate. You can see that these Archer Militia, there's a lot of them. There's also the Bandit Javelins, but all of these low tier skirmishers are going to be terrible in melee. And again, we've got some Mountain Orc Berserkers. They're trying to get into the melee, trying to find the soft, gooey centre of these Eriador army. And without the skirmishers, particularly without the Forest Shell Gatekeepers in the background, Baconfish's army is going to find itself hopelessly outgunned. You can see that the Misty Mountains have suffered a heavy toll for their work, but they have come out of this the better, I think. See that more Forest Shell Captains have been committed. The Pikes are out of formation, so they will manage to get quite a few kills. And we can see down here, the Mountain Orc Berserkers are getting into the Woodland Hunters and the Archer Militia. They are in guard mode though, so they will continue to fire. And the ammunition does need to be used up. A lot more of these orcs need to die. Eriador is in a bit of a precarious position at this point. More bandit javelins are coming over to try and hold back the tide, because it does look like over here the advance of the wargs has been somewhat stunted. The Dunedain Rangers and the Forest Shell Captains keeping watch, while I think the Blackwolds and the Thieves of Tharbad are doing what they can over here as we move forward, and indeed it has turned into a bit of a grim choke point fight. The wargs, the Bolgs champions in here with the underground goblins, I believe they are trying to force their way through, because if they do, they'll have the beating of Eriador, and these Blackwolds won't be able to hold them off forever. The sheer weight of numbers is going to count against Eriador in the end here, so some good aggressive play here, I like it. Once again, the two Misty Mountains players combining very well to hunt down their prey, which is good news, because on the other front things are not going quite so well for the defenders. You can see that the front line hasn't seen a great deal of movement, but nor have the attackers taken a great deal of attritional casualties. The Sindar Blade Masters have, but they're a lighter unit. Stuff like the Dunedain Wardens and the Elder Enway Spearmen and these Arthurdane Men-at-Arms, they are going to be able to withstand this sort of atrocious battle all day long, and the Orcs, they're going to be in trouble here eventually. Because as soon as this choke point is lost, they will be able to flood into the settlement with their elite units, and as I've said before, those pikes that they've also got some Falas Lords moving forward. The Arnorian in the High Elven army was where most of the danger was coming from. Eriador was more of an annoyance than anything else. They had the Forest Shell Captains and the Gatekeepers, but other than that, their army was largely lower tier. If we have a look at the percentages, you can see that the defenders are behind, which usually is a bad sign, but then usually the Orcs are the ones on the attack. The Orcs have got a lot more disposable troops on the defence here than the attackers do on the offence. A reversal of the traditional attack-defence. And now we have, let's see what they have. They've got some Orc Fellas, they've got some Witch-Round Pikes, some Orc Marauders. They're sending in the lower tier troops to just sort of clog them up. And this is not a bad idea, because they aren't actually making a huge amount of inroads. And now they're using the catapult. If they can get a nice catapult hit in the centre there, then that'll be nice and cost-effective indeed. What's going on over here? It looks like, yeah, the Misty Mountains have managed to force their way through here now. You can see the Blackwolds, there's only two of them remaining. The underground goblins, and you can see the Snaga pouring forward, following the Bolgs champions. And now it's going to be another case of a single unit having to hold back the entire Misty Mountains reinforcement column. And the Forest Shell Captains are a little bit more well equipped to deal with that than the Black Waltz, but they still will crumble if the Volks champions are able to sort of burrow deep into their ranks, which they are. The attempt is being made now. The Dunedain Rangers need to focus down these Volks champions because they are still wargs, despite the fact they are very elite wargs. They might be able to get a decent amount of damage done, but as you can see, the mass of the wargs is too much for the Forestshell captains, and the Dunedain Rangers are about to be engaged in melee by the Volks champions, although the Volks champions have taken a lot of losses getting through those Forestshell captains. Honestly, I would probably leave the Dunedain Rangers in melee at this point. There's only 10 of them remaining. They would probably lose, but you also run the risk of having your Forestshell captains rear-charged by some angry Volks champions now. The Warg Riders are much less equipped to deal with that sort of thing than the Volks champions, so the Forestshell captains really proving their mettle there. But even so, I don't fancy their chances too much against this amount. Even though a lot of it is trashy goblins, there's still trolls and wargs, which it's not looking good for Eriador. Very much trapped between a rock and a hard place. These Dunedain Rangers need to be focused down by these Volks champions, and indeed the target has been set. And you can see just even with a very slow charge with only 10 of them, the Volks champions massacring these lightly armoured rangers, not able to withstand the charge at all. Meanwhile over here, which is where the defenders are having the most joy so far in this battle. Oh man, look at that frame rate just drop. Again over here the Forestshell captains holding back essentially the entire army of orcs. There is a gap over here though, which the bandit javelins, victory seems certain for the bandit javelins against this amount of men. But the orcs of the Misty Mountains, I do still believe they will be victorious over here, even with all of these skirmishers now pointing in the right direction. There's more Dunedain Rangers and there's more Cardinal and Elders. They're firing at the Volks champions. The Volks champions are a thing of the past now, so it could be that Baconfish with his skirmish line is able to turn this fight around enough to the point where the Misty Mountains are going to be crippled later on in the battle. I still think he will probably lose this, simply because of the weight of numbers he's having to deal with and the fact that his line is crumbling in places. But he's going to be able to do a lot of damage here. And honestly, the defenders are going to need something from the Misty Mountains to help with all of those elites from the High Elves and Arnor. Of course, the defenders could also try and run out the clock. Oof.
Without him, his troops will lose their will to fight.
There goes one of the generals. That was either Cold Front or Tundra's Fox's general. I think it was probably Cold Front, simply because his orc bodyguards were sort of leading the charge early on in the game. And it was over here that they fell. This Goblin infantry has managed to worm its way around, so Tundra's Fox getting some Goblin infantry into this Archer militia. A battle of truly garbage units. But really what they want is to stop these archers from firing as much as they can, because they're taking a beating from the skirmish force here. You can see these woodland hunters, the frame rate dropping, but again, around the other side, more Goblin infantry from Tundra's Fox getting into the bandit javelins and the Dunedain Rangers. They won't win that fight, but they will disrupt the skirmish. And at the moment, that's what where all of Eriador's hopes lie. You see there's more in the background over there. More Orcish forces, more heavy Goblin infantry, some Mountain Uruk archers, and Mountain Orc Berserkers. Tundra's Fox has got more of an army left than Cold Front at this point, but I do think that the aggressive push from these two was what was called for. Overwhelm Eriador and don't allow them to use their skirmish force. Don't allow them to advance down into the settlement and pen you in. Being aggressive as the defenders often pays quite heavy dividends. And if we look over here, the Warg Riders managed to force their way through the Forestshell captains, but they too, under a huge amount of skirmish fire. And this is Tundra's Fox's Wargs. And again, Wargs don't do very well under arrow fire. They don't have the highest armor values. Very much an anti-cavalry unit, and now they're routing. Too much crossbow bolts, or too many crossbow bolts to withstand. Meanwhile, if we go around, we can see that really they have managed to force their way through the Forestshell captains, so now Eriador will find themselves surrounded and probably overwhelmed. Meanwhile, if we look back over to here, we can see that still there's not a great deal of movement on this front line. So honestly, while the attackers are probably having the best of these engagements, well, actually I don't know, Sindar Blademasters are largely gone at this point. And the battle-ready Dunedain victory does seem certain, but this sort of atricious fighting is going to favour the Orcs more than anything else. And this is going pretty well for the defenders so far, all things considered, but I do still think that the final assault of Arnor and the High Elves is going to be very hard for them to weather, simply because of all of those elites. That High Elven army is very scary. You can see that there's another unit of Dunedain Wardens from Master Blaster being pushed up to try and help with the fight, but I am surprised that they are leading the way with what is primarily spearmen, because spearmen are not very quick at killing. You can see that the Sindar Blade Masters are actually returning to the fight, so they are still alive. Yeah, more Falas Lords. I would have recommended a few more offensive units used to try and crack through this line a little bit more quickly, because at the moment the Battle Ready Dunedain and the Sindar Blade Masters, they do fulfill that role. But these spears, they certainly do not. And these Orc Marauders, they're managing to hold the line for a significant amount of time, and there's another unit of Goblin Band forming up into Skiltron. It's just more fodder that they're having to fight their way through. You can see that now they are pushing a little bit more with their mats, the Falas Lords. Friendly fire is not really what the Orcs need, because it could send their men routing against all of these elites. But you can see now, oof, that was a nice hit though on the Sindar Blade Masters and Battle Ready Dunedain. The Numenorian Shadow Guard up here. Perfect shots. A lot of them are hitting the floor, but those that are not are really getting some nice hits onto that line there. And this attrition, can they weather it? That is the question. The heavy goblin crossbows from Cold Front and from Tundra's Fox could be very crucial in this instance, because that's going to be one of the real problems for Arnor and the High Elves to deal with. So Eriador is going to need to hold back these reinforcements for quite some time yet. The Mountain Uruk Archers giving Eriador a taste of their own medicine in terms of a skirmish fight, and on the other end the Snaga Archers are doing the same. Lower tier archers, but still, the volume of fire that they're going to be under is going to be a real problem for them. Oof. You can see all of those Snaga arrows pouring into the Archer Militia, and the Forest Shell Gatekeepers, and also the Cardalan Elders are in there as well. Oof. Mountain Uruk Archers. There are still some Forest Shell Captains alive. You can see the blue cakes, but a unit of 1, a unit of, what is that, 14 or 13? 13 indeed, so yeah. This is going to be the end. Heavy Goblin Infantry, Tundra's Fox and Cold Front's aggressive push has paid off, which is good to see. I do like a bit of aggression. Now there's some underground goblins getting ready to engage in melee while supported by the suppressing fire of the Snaga. And we can see the Archer Militia just trying to hold back the Horde. You can see the frame rate drops whenever I look at one of the big clusters of action that's going on. The Gatekeepers, which would have been one of the real trump cards here, now being focused down by a lot of arrows. Their fire rate is not as high as Archers, of course. They are pretty good in melee though, so they could yet offer a bit more punishment. You know, and now it's becoming a little bit more urgent for the attackers on this front. They need to force their way through this choke point very quickly, because if the Misty Mountains are able to get all of those reinforcements over to this choke point, this battle is basically over. The attackers, even if the attackers don't outright lose this battle, they won't be able to force their way to the town centre in time, because there is of course a time limit. Interesting. Even with all those elites, even with that hugely powerful High Elven stack, the attackers still having issues. Outnumbered as they were, the choke points you would imagine would actually work in their favour, but they've chosen to lead the way with more defensive units, and they're not able to hack through these low tier units quickly enough. And there are also these Witch Realm Pikemen which are being targeted by the Archers, which is a good choice. See these Numenorian Shadow Guard. Just brutal, but they are also mostly hitting the floor, it would seem. Some of them are getting over the edge, but you can see that a lot of these arrows wasted are hitting the floor. See there's some Arthedain Men-at-Arms back there. We shall see how this transpires. But I'm favouring the defenders here. If not through outright victory, then through simply the attackers running out of time. The composition... Well, what's going on down here? Bit of action going on down here. We can see the Dunedain Rangers were involved in a battle with some Goblin Archers from Cold Front, so just poking and prodding. Let's see, what is this? This is a very strange front line indeed. You can see actually over here. What is going on over here? We can see routing Goblin Infantry. I thought that they were actually going to try and circumvent the whole settlement and attack Arnor and the High Elves from the other end, which would have been bold.
Only half the enemy force remains.
Only half the enemy force remains. Again, I wasn't entirely sure of the rules of this scenario, but I can't imagine there were too many rules, other than just sort of go nuts and try and take on the settlement. You can see actually as we move closer to this choke point, as the frame rate will surely drop once more, we can see that the defence is now starting to look a little bit more thin on the ground, and this is what the attackers need to see. Again, I would send forward that unit of Arthedain Men-at-Arms in the background to try and force their way through. I know the catapult fire is a lot to bear, and they are taking a huge amount of casualties now on elite units, but they need to get through here. They can't afford to dilly-dally any longer. Because if we look up here, Eriador is clinging to life. The Cardinal and Elders pulling out their dual daggers in melee. But again, they are still an archer unit, and they are overwhelmed. They're too lightweight to withstand all of these goblins, and they are also taking a hefty amount of skirmish fire from the Snaga on the hill. So Eriador, this is going to be the end. They have managed to rout the Snaga archers in melee. Cardinal and Elders, suddenly victory seems certain, but every time they take a volley, it switches to defeat seems certain. They're not the best in a skirmish fight, and under arrow fire, they are taking a pretty substantial amount of losses. You can also see the tragedy that has befallen the gatekeepers over here. There just aren't very many of them left, only 9 of them, being overwhelmed by filthy goblins. The Gobbos are going to have victory today. It's down to Goblin Town. And now we have the Doomsday Rangers. Victory does seem certain for Eriador on this front, but that's only because they're up against Snaga archers in melee. As soon as the rest of the Misty Mountains forces collapse on these Dunedain Rangers, their fortunes will turn around pretty dramatically. But yes, Eriador is not long for this world, and in fact it does look like the rest of the Misty Mountains forces are actually pulling back into the settlement, ready to defend the other choke point from the Arnorian and the High Elven advance, because this is going to be sufficient, it would seem, to destroy what is left of Eriador. These Snaga are now out of ammunition, being committed to melee against these Dunedain Rangers. The sheer weight of numbers, just too many. Horde tactics, the Goblin Tide. And then over here we can see, I do like the Cardinal and Elders. They're a cool concept for a unit. Can't wait for the next patch, and as I said, it seems like that's going to be sooner than I thought it was. I don't know how soon, but just the fact that things are progressing at a pace that I haven't seen in quite some time is a reason to be cheerful, I think. Meanwhile, we can see these Numenorean Shadow Guard are out of ammunition. They have pulled out their longswords. Meanwhile, down here we can see that the Orcs have yet again clogged this valley with a huge amount of fodder. Falas Lords, now they're going to be reinforced by a column of Dunedain Wardens and Arthur Men-at-Arms. We're about halfway through the time limit, and about halfway through the battle as well, so it's going to be close. That was a nice hit from the catapult. As I thought, the catapult has proven to be pretty decisive in this battle. Fire arrows coming back to try and deal with that. You can see the Eldorenway archers being forced to target an artillery piece. That's not a bad thing actually for the defenders. The catapult has already got its money's worth, and this means the Eldorenway archers will not be able to target down your elite units like the Guardians of Khan Doom, which I did see filing into that choke point. But we can see the burning catapult now. See if I can get a screenshot of this that's decent. There we go. Might be the thumbnail, who knows? But yes, this catapult has already paid for itself. It might be able to get one final lob off before the other one catches fire. Will it? There it goes, crumbling to dust. It needs to hurry up, otherwise it will catch on fire. Oh, it has. But it has managed to get one. Nope, it didn't. Could that yet be the decisive moment in this battle? Goblin Band, more Goblin Band being sent over. A truly astronomical amount of Goblin Band, but as we can see, this is going to turn into pretty much a single choke point fight, unless the Misty Mountains try and circumvent the map and attack the High Elves and Arnor from the side, which honestly I think might be a good idea. They would lose, but they would also distract the Arnorians and the High Elves from going through this choke point to the extent that they will need to.
Our ally lies dead.
And there, finally, we can see Eriador's general giving up the ghost to Cave Trolls. If you're going to be slain by something, then the Cave Trolls, it's not the most humiliating thing to be slain by. There were Snaga everywhere, so it's a good thing he didn't get killed by one of them. The Eldorenway Swordsmen are coming up, so finally some more attack-minded units coming up, but it's already going to be a bit late because the Guardians of Khan Doom are in here now, which means this is going to be a much more difficult front line to break down. We can see that more Goblin Band. The amount of goblins they're having to force their way through. In this sort of situation, I'm sure they would love to have the dwarves on their side with that mass, those elite troops. They would be able to force their way through a choke point like this. But alas, the more lightweight elves are here. And this is the sort of situation where the elves don't do very well. This is probably the one situation in which the elves are at a disadvantage most of the time in the current patch. the High Elves trying to... I think the attackers realise at this point that it's time to throw caution to the wind and commit a lot, because the Arnor Gate Guards are on their way. We've also got Dunedain Rangers, more Arthedain Man-at-Arms. Arnor is pouring into this choke point. And again, this could get messy for the frame rate pretty quickly. But yeah, the Heavy Goblin Crossbowmen, they're winded. Don't know how much ammunition they've used. Another unit of Guardians of Khan Doom, so again, when the line is getting low, they simply reinforce. And the onus is on the attackers here. I mean, there was a little period at the start of the match where the attackers were a little bit immobile, and I think leading the way with more defensive units is going to cost them on this run here. Again, I don't know what the rules were, but they could have tried to go around this whole situation as well and try and attack from that choke point over there and try and really split up. But as it is, I think that, I mean, the attackers don't really have much of an excuse. Those Arnorian and High Elven armies were extremely elite. Meanwhile, more Orcs of Gundabad, Tundra's Foxes, Halberds. I worry for the attackers here. I think that they might have blown it. Again, maybe a few more ways into the settlement would not be amiss. But having said that, I do think that, you know, considering this is his first map, this is a very good first scenario that he's made. The potential for some decent action exists. Although it does look like this particular map is going to devolve into a single choke point encounter. We shall see. We can see that finally Arnor and the High Elves are doing what they should have done a long time ago. And they are pushing through with sheer weight of numbers. You can see that more Arnor pikemen are moving forward, the dismounted Arthedain Knights, and some Mithlon nobles as well. The Trebuchet is also moving in closer, presumably to punish the Orcs if they decide to try and blob up. We can see that some Witch Realm Scourge Raiders are being committed, but oof. This is what we call a frame rate killer, so I'm just going to stand back. It's not going to be the most visually appealing thing on YouTube, I imagine. The compression usually murders sequences like this, but alas, we can see that at this point it's just a case of throwing everything into one choke point, which is the price that the attackers really have to pay at this point. But they are really starting to force their way through with the mass. The Arnorians providing the mass, the High Elves providing the killing power. And more men are being committed. We've got the Witch Realm Hammer Guard are moving forward. The attackers don't have a choice though. This is what they have to do at this point. They've painted themselves into a corner. They didn't do this earlier on when the lower tier troops were here, so they now need to do it when the higher tier troops are here, which could yet prove to be a huge problem for them. But the attackers are pushing through slowly and surely. It's just a cluster of death and doom down there. We can see that over here some mountain trolls being committed, trying to sort of withstand the mass push, because the choke point is still in effect, but there are areas where it's starting to get thin. The Trolls of Gundabad, this has turned into a real mess of a fight very quickly. We can see we're closing in on the final 10,000 frames. I'm not sure whether the attackers have what it takes to win this. Victory seems certain on the front line for the Arnorians and the High Elves. They have managed to munch their way through the defence pretty effectively, but I'm wondering if they haven't left it too late. If they had done this earlier, victory would surely have been theirs with the expertise that the High Elves and the Arnorians had in their melee armies. Tundra's Fox bringing his cave trolls in. The trolls en masse trying to hold back the push. Oh, that was unfortunate. I'm surprised the Trebuchet is not on fire ammo. You can see the burning settlement. Can they reclaim their homes here? Although this, based on the architecture, I would imagine that this is more a sort of Eriador-esque settlement. I know that it's vanilla medieval architecture, but it certainly seems like a sort of place that the free peoples of Eriador would inhabit, and their army is the only one that has been completely destroyed so far. Poor Baconfish. Being attacked from two sides, from two very large Misty Mountain stacks. The Trebuchet is now on fire ammunition, and it does finally look like... I'm not going to be able to zoom in on this fight because the frame rate will be god-awful. But it does look like the Arnorians and the High Elves have managed to finally make their elite units tell, but I'm still wondering if they haven't left it too late. What have they actually got in reserve? It doesn't look like a great deal. They have the Dunedain bodyguard moving forward, the Trebuchet crew, some Elder Enway archers. They've got 2 units of Smiths of Aragian, which could yet be decisive. The Mountaineeric archers are firing on this hill over here. Let's go over and have a look at what they're targeting. Holy moly. That is a big blob. Okay. The time has come. We shall slow it right down to just 0.1 speed and get right into the midst of this fight. We can see some trolls. There's a lot of pikes, there's a lot of spears, men at arms. I'm going to try and get a screenshot of this guy swinging his mace while he's surrounded on all sides. This is the place for a screenshot right here, right in the thick of it. What have we got going on? A lot of the trolls have fallen now, though. I don't know if that'll be the thumbnail, but again, we've got to be careful with taking screenshots in this situation. It has been known to crash in the past, but now back to regular speed. It's not actually a terrible lag. It has been worse in the past, to be fair. But again, we can see Elder and my archers in melee. Victory seems certain for a lot of these attacking forces, but I do wonder if the attrition is going to be just too much for them to bear. Snaga archers, heavy goblin halberdiers. Again, the Misty Mountains reinforcements I think could be the tipping point for this battle. There are some Witch Realm Blackguard as well. Basically, the entire battle, the epicenter of it is here. You can see these Witch Realm Blackguard, which are in melee. I'm going to just turn it down to half speed, I think. This battle hasn't been overly long, so I feel like we can go to half speed. Again, I'm thinking another screenshot, to be fair. I think that might well end up being the screenshot. It's got the giant blob in the background. But as we can see, the crossbows could yet be doing damage. I'm not sure. They might have already been committed to melee. It's very hard to tell when everyone's in a big cluster like this. The smiths are being sent forward. The Nolder Elder nobles are still alive. They're going to be very difficult to deal with in melee. Let's turn it back up to 1 speed, I think. Again, there's still over 10,000 frames. And again, this push, if this had only happened earlier, the attackers, I feel, would have won. But as it is, the defenders might yet have the numbers to push them back. The Witch Realm units in particular are going to be doing a lot of damage. The fire in the backs of these pikemen from the Shadow Guard and the Uruk archers, or the Mountaineeric archers I should say, some of them are being committed to melee now again. Numbers are the Orcs' best friends, and goblins of course. Heavy goblin crossbowmen are firing missiles. I'm not sure what at though. They can't have the best firing angle. And again, we've got more reinforcements from the Misty Mountains coming over from the other front. What have we got over here? A flanking unit, it would seem. Nope, they're routing. Well, that's a shame. That's a real shame. I was hoping to see some flanking action. Again, what have we got here? These heavy goblin crossbowmen are very tired. Cold Front trying to move them into a better position, I think. Because again, they don't have the best firing angle. If you have to arc your shots with the crossbows, they tend to lose quite a lot of their killing power. Oh, with that trebuchet. Could that yet be the thing which turns this battle to the attackers? As you can see, the attackers have they're starting to die down a little bit on the front, but the Smiths are Aragian. You know, it's all elite units that the attackers have left, really. The Arthedain men-at-arms are sort of standard tier, but they've got Dunedain Knights. They've got their hugely elite Pike Corps. The Arnor Gate Guards and Imladris Guards together are so difficult to break down.
The enemy are badly bloodied. They have lost half their
The
men.
Snaga, though, the mighty Snaga archers pouring what little ammunition they have left into the blob, hoping to do enough damage to just sort of wear this down. But it looks like this battle is turning in favour of the attackers. Let's have a look at the percentages of kills. And as you can see, the attackers 2% ahead in terms of the killing stakes. The question is, with just under 10,000 frames left to go, have they left it too late? Will the timer run dry? Will all the sand filter through the hourglass? That's the real question, I think, at this point, because I don't think in a straight-up fight the defenders can win anymore. I think the amount of elite units that the attackers have on hand is just too much. That High Elven stack was a thing of nightmares. But we shall see. You can see that this heavy goblin infantry just sort of shoring up the line. Another decent hit, mostly on orc fellas, but even so, just the fact that the line is starting to look thin in some places is a reason for the defenders to be pretty concerned. Having said that, sneaky, we just turn it down so it doesn't lag quite so much. We can see these Númenórean Shadow Guard, they're fighting against the Troll Slayers. I think what they were trying to do is get into the Trebuchet crew, but at the very least they are actually preventing the Troll Slayers from getting to the front line. So again, these delaying tactics are what the Orcs can hope for, so I imagine that when the timer runs out, that's when the Orcish reinforcements arrive. We shall see. But again, even if the defenders were to win in the time limit and Orcish reinforcements were to arrive, I don't think their army is going to be big enough to withstand it. But who can say? There's a lot of elite pikes that they had, and yet more men are filtering down in. The Noldor Elder nobles, the last thing the defenders would want to see, filtering down this corridor of doom, which is where most of the killing in this battle will have taken place. Every army except the Eriador army has seen action on this front. I'm a little bit disappointed that it doesn't look like we're going to see a lot of action in this settlement in here. I feel like all of the action has taken place on the outer sort of ring of defences, and that is understandable, because if the defenders had let the attackers get into sort of these areas over here, it would have been game over. The attackers would have been able to completely overwhelm them. But I do think a little bit of tweaking on this scenario, maybe giving maybe making it a 4v4 and making it so the attackers don't just have elite stacks of doom, might sort of encourage the use of this sort of central plaza a little bit more, because I think that the village itself deserves to be used in this battle. It might yet be used. I mean, we can see that just a little bit into the streets. Heavy Goblin infantry. Victory seems certain over here. The Arthedain men-at-arms, the Orc Berserkers and the Blackguard. So over here they've overextended themselves a little bit, but everywhere else you can also see the Arnor Gate Guards, the Númenórean Shadow Guard and the Orc Bodyguards of Tundra's Fox doing their best. But these Heavy Goblin Crossbowmen of Tundra's Fox and Coldfront in a fantastic firing position, so they managed to sort of send them around the outside as we fight through the choppy frame rate. These two crossbow units are going to be able to get some nice rear fire, and you can see defeat suddenly seeming certain for the Arnor Gate Guards, and this crossbow fire could be enough to halt the momentum. Crossbows are so powerful in the current patch, and the Heavy Goblin crossbows are no exception to that. Firing into the backs of unshielded units, although I think crossbows completely negate shields anyway, to be fair, or at least halves their values. I know that it completely negates armour. You can see these Smiths of Eregion, defeat seems certain, things are looking bad. The Trebuchet trying to turn itself around. Victory seems certain for Snaga archers in melee against Smiths of Eregion. It's not every day you see that. If we just go out a little further, if we survey the situation, we can see in here in the basin, the Orc Bodyguards and the Númenórean Shadow Guard will be finished off by the elites. The Noldor Elder Nobles, the Dunedain Trollslayers and the Dunedain Bodyguard, as well as the Gate Guards, they will be destroyed, and at that point the crossbows will have, well, they will be chased off, or they will have to engage themselves in melee. But I think that by that point it will be too late. I think the crossbows, in conjunction with the Witch Realm units, have been sufficient to essentially stonewall the attackers' advance. So it means that the Orc defenders may well have victory, although these Arnorian pikemen, I think they realise the peril at this point that they are in. Trying to get into melee, just trying to stop the crossbow fire, but I think it might be too late. The Trebuchet is doing the artillery dance, where it can't really get into a position to fire, so it spins in a circle. It's always incredibly infuriating when that happens. I know that I hate it when it happens to me, so it must be very, very frustrating for the defender, well, the attackers I should say, to behold. I'm so used to the forces of good being on the defence in one of these sort of larger scale scenarios. And here we can see the Heavy Goblin Halberdiers. I still think, you know, the crossbows being the thing that turns it around, the Misty Mountains were the two Misty Mountains armies were the turning points in this battle. The fact that they were able to crush Eriador underfoot and the fact that the attackers on this front just weren't able or weren't willing to commit forward their elite forces quickly enough to force their way through the trash meant that the Misty Mountains were able to get over here and reinforce. And ultimately, in spite of all of the losses the Orcs have suffered, I think that might be what pushes the battle in their favour. You can just see how the crossbows have scythed through these units. I mean, the Smiths of Aragian have taken huge damage. See that these Arnor pikemen, the crossbows trying to get out of the way, trying to sort of keep themselves in a firing position. The Númenórean Shadow Guard falling back, trying to sort of block the advance of the pikes, and the pikes will fall. Tundra's Fox's crossbowmen are in guard mode and continuing to fire. Cold Front's getting further up the hill. They are exhausted, but they will get into a nice firing position, may be able to fire directly down onto the heads of these Arnor Gate Guard and Dunedain Bodyguard, which is going to be incredibly bad for them. You can see that over here, where the Arnorians slightly overextended, they were squashed by Mountain Orc Berserkers and the incredibly strong Witch Realm Blackguard with their armour piercing and their terror, although it's not really called terror in Medieval 2, but they do inspire fear among enemy units. It's harder to rout units in Medieval 2 than Warhammer, of course, though. You can see there are still Falas Lords on the front line. These guys, they don't do a lot of damage, but my god, they're damn near bulletproof. Still fighting strong, but ultimately I do think that the writing is on the wall for the elves here. Too conservative with their numbers and their elites. They had the power to punch right through this corridor. In conjunction with that trebuchet, they could have done it. And then they could have forced their way into the settlement. And then the sheer numbers of the Misty Mountains, I don't think the reinforcements from the Misty Mountains wouldn't have been as decisive then, but credit to Tundra's Fox and Cold Front here, because I think that they played the battle exactly how they needed to.
And are becoming tired.
Good use of the Misty Mountains with their disposable units and with their powerful units. The one misstep I think that the defenders have really made in this battle was sending out those Blackback Berserkers very early on. Other than that, I think that they've mounted a very effective defence, and the attackers simply weren't aggressive enough. When the defenders are being more aggressive than the attackers, you know you've got a problem. And again, this is a new scenario, so there is a case for saying maybe it's a little bit in favour of the defenders, but I would say that that Arnor and that High Elven stack, you saw how when they fully committed, they essentially went from here and just murdered their way right to here. And if they had done that earlier on, even with the catapult there, I feel like this battle would have been theirs. As it stands, though, the mountain village will remain in the hands of the Orcs and the Goblins. You can see these crossbowmen still firing. Crossbows have got a huge amount of ammunition in the current patch. That will be being lowered a little bit in the next patch. Oof, and the crossbows. Point blank fire into the Nolder Elder Nobles, and they will drop. A few of them dropping there, and the Nolder Elder Nobles' victory does seem certain, but ultimately they will be overwhelmed. I think that is their fate. There's 3 Númenórean Shadow Guard just running around over there. One player has admitted defeat. Don't know whether that was Baconfish. You can see these heavy goblin crossbows. They might be out of ammunition at this point, in which case they will be committed to melee, of course. And then they'll have to rely on the Witch Realm Blackguard to really do the heavy lifting in melee. Let's just turn the speed down all the way to 1. Get into this. Even on speed 1, the motion blur when I try and move is a little bit extreme, but we can see Arnor pikemen and dismounted Arthurdane knights trying their best, but the sheer numbers, even against Snaga archers. How many Dunedain bodyguard left? There are 40 Dunedain bodyguard left, but at this point I don't think so. I think the Arnorians, there's 4 Arnor Gate Guards. The Smiths, it seems like they've been fully destroyed. Yeah, there's only 1 banner carrier left over here, and that seems to be it. So the Smiths have been defeated, thanks in no small part due to the crossbows. The Mountain Orc Berserkers taunting I should say, chanting is what I meant to say. Here we go, back up to 1 speed. The Nolder Elders, I mean, even the Nolder Elders, they're being held back by heavy goblin infantry and I think some Orc bodyguard, what remains of an Orc bodyguard unit anyway. I did see the Orc bodyguard name label show up just for a second there, and the fact that the Orc bodyguard has lasted so long in melee against the elites of the Elves and Arnor is testament to them. They would have lost, of course, but just the fact that the skirmish fight with those crossbows was going so heavily in favour of the defenders. You can see defeat seems almost certain. The balance of power way in favour of the defenders, although there's still just under 4,000 frames to go. You can see that there's some Dunedain bodyguard firing their arrows, but it's too late for that. The Dunedain bodyguard alone, you can see Tundra's Fox's crossbows unrelenting. You can see that Cold Front's crossbows as well, still going about their grisly work. But yes, I do like the idea of this map. I think maybe a few more ways in would help it. I think maybe even if we even if some of the elevation up here was used as sort of ways in, it would make for a nice multi-layered battle, I feel. And there goes Elrond, the High Elven General falls. And also, maybe then you could make it a 4v4 as an idea. Again, just spitballing here. Because I do think that obviously the second half of this battle was dominated in this one choke point, which, you know, I'm not opposed to a choke point fight, but and I do think that the attackers were partly to blame for that, for not committing earlier, but even so, I think a more spread out fight would be good, but still a very good first scenario by Goddess Nimhain, or Outfit as he is also called. And this was a very enjoyable fight to behold. Obviously the frame rate, which is dying very quickly, and the Witcher and Blackguard are pursuing the Dunedain bodyguard, so I think we can turn it up to ×6 speed here, because Master Blaster is really just drawing out the fight at this point. You know, the battle is over. He might as well turn around and fight like a man. Face your death with some courage, as it were. Let's have a look here. The Dunedain bodyguard are no pushovers in melee, and seeing as the Blackguard have already taken a decent amount of damage in melee, although the Dunedain bodyguard as well at range. Dunedain bodyguard possibly going to be one of the few units to keep their armor piercing arrows, because they are the steel bowmen. I think that they will be very few and far between. I think the Dale Dragon Slayers and the Temple Guard might be the only 3 units to get it. They will be extremely expensive as a result, which I'm in favour of. Again, I do think that the Dale Dragon Slayers especially need to keep their armor piercing arrows, because otherwise there's no point to them existing at all. You would just pick the Royal Guard, because I have heard talk that every archer unit would be having their armor piercing removed, which I think is a bit of a knee-jerk reaction to people saying that the AP arrows are cancerous, which they are. But I do think that the Dale Dragon Slayers should keep theirs, if nothing else. And also either the Dunedain Bodyguard or the Troll Slayers, simply because it seems like kind of the idea behind the whole unit is to be sort of a slayer of very large entity units. As long as they don't have a lot of ammunition, that sort of thing would be fine. But if you take away the AP from some of these units, it would completely eliminate their reason for being. But as we can see, the Dunedain Bodyguard, there goes the Arnorian General, at the hands of the Blackguards, who once again have proven themselves to be a very strong unit in this battle indeed. And here we come to the end. You can see these two. This one Dunedain Bodyguard puts up his last stand, but he is doomed. He's still eager, amazingly. Oh, he was shot to death.
On this day, we have nothing to be ashamed of. It was but a cruel twist of fate that snatched victory from our grasp.
And there we go. So, based on the kills, we can see that the Eriador player, despite having the least elite army, was able to get the most amount of kills, and I think that speaks to how the High Elves and Arnor simply waited too long to commit themselves, and they should have committed themselves earlier. Yes, they would have taken casualties, but sometimes you just need to tank the damage. In a battle with a time limit, you can't afford to hang around. There's no careful approach. You just gotta go in. And as we can see, the Gundabad army is doing decently well, and the Misty Mountains army is very similar kills, except for this one Gundabad army. But of course, he had the daunting task of sending most of his fodder units. I think that was Oage's army. Yes, let's have a look at the stats for the High Elven army. So this is the scenario creator outfits stats. We can see that the Eldarenway Arch is getting a lot of kills, as they normally do. The Noldor Elders also doing the same. Falas Lord's getting a lot of kills. Eldarenway Spearmen getting a lot of kills against the fodder. But I still can't help feeling that sending forward the spears to try and just slowly grind the enemy down was the wrong move in this situation. I think that they needed to send forward and just try and crush from the start. Smiths of Eregion just got perforated by those crossbowmen. Very good play by Tundra's Fox and Cold Front there. And the Sindar Blade Masters, the 480, that was the one committed early. They got a lot of kills, and again, I think the Elder Renway Swordsman partnered up with them would have been able to do some serious damage, and again, that was a very good scenario though, very nice. I look forward to seeing what he creates in the future, because of course more scenario makers and map makers is always a good thing. Adds to the variety of the game and keeps it fresh. So yes, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next, which I will hope to be a sort of a little bit of a preview for the next patch, and I hope to see you there.